This episode is sponsored by Therapy Notes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. I'm Gordon Brewer, and this is episode number 294 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. So glad you've joined us, and if this is your first time joining the podcast, welcome. And if you're coming back for more, hope you've taken time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. So I'm really looking forward to you hearing from my guest today. She's no stranger to this podcast and has been on several times before, and that's my dear friend, Jessica Tappana. And Jessica and I are in a mastermind group together, so we talk every week, and we text a lot, and all of that sort of good thing, and she is one person that you really need to get to know. Jessica is the owner of two businesses. One is Aspire Counseling, located in Columbia, Missouri, and also Simplified SEO, which she's most known for. And Jessica is really one of those SEO. She's an SEO expert. And in this particular episode, we're going to be talking about AI. And so hopefully you're not missing out on artificial intelligence and things like ChatGPT, plus we mentioned a few others, and just how we can use those in our practices, particularly around marketing in particular, but also just talk about some of the things to look forward to with AI, and also maybe some cautionary tales about AI. So anyway, looking forward to you hearing my conversation with Jessica, and I think you're going to learn a lot in this episode just by listening to her. And, it's I will say for me, I've really enjoyed using ChatGPT. Once I learned about it and started using it, I use it probably 3 or 4 times a week now, just for different things that I'm working on, and particularly with writing prompts and that kind of thing. So looking forward to you hearing my conversation with Jessica just about this new phenomenon that we're living in right now. But before we get to my conversation with Jessica, I'd love for you, particularly if you're new to private practice and getting started in your practice, to find out more about the Practice Launch Club. The Practice Launch Club is a membership community I put together a year or two ago, and it is specifically for those folks that are just getting started. And we meet 2 times a month for a mastermind group or focus group, whatever you want to call it, and just talk about the things that folks are working on with their practices, things they're trying to learn about running a private practice and getting started. As I'm recording this, we met today, and a lot of great questions that came out of that group today that we talked about, just from anywhere from accounting to marketing to figuring out what to do when you start to grow and you start to your practice starts to get full, how you handle all of that. So I'd invite you to go over and check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/launch club. And during the month of August and September, I'm offering a discount for your membership in that. If you'll use the promo code just PLC Fall 2023, you can get $20 off your monthly membership in that particular group. So go be sure and check it out. And also here, before we get to my conversation with Jessica, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the Sightcraft Network, of which this podcast is a member, to find out about some other great podcasts that you can be listening to. And also hear more from our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes.
Hey there, I'm Chris McDonald, and if you don't know me yet, I'm host of the Holistic Counseling Podcast, which is for therapists who want to deepen their knowledge of holistic modalities and build their practice with confidence. The Holistic Counseling Podcast is proudly part of the Sightcraft Podcast Network, a network of podcasts focused on helping people live more meaningful and productive lives. Join me each week as we explore the best practices for integrating holistic approaches into therapy and delve into the many benefits. Whether you're looking for new techniques or seeking to deepen your own personal journey towards wellness, this podcast is the perfect companion for your holistic path. If you haven't listened yet, you can find it over at holisticcounselingpodcast.com and discover other resources, including products, books, and other trainings to help support you in your holistic journey.
One of the keys to a successful private practice is having the right systems and processes in place to make things run as smoothly as possible. With a system like Therapy Notes, you'll have more time to spend with what matters most, your clients. Therapy Notes is a complete practice management system with everything you need to manage patient records, schedule appointments, meet with patients remotely, create rich documentation, and bill insurance right at your fingertips. Their streamlined software is accessible wherever and whenever you need it. Your clinical records will be secure with less paperwork, which means you can give a much better quality of care. It's the EHR that Gordon uses in his practice. Be sure to check them out today by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and be sure to use the promo code GORDON to get 2 months free.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm so glad to have back with me my dear friend, Jessica Tappana. Hey, Jessica.
Hey, I'm so excited to be back.
Yes, it's good. And I can't remember the last time you were on the podcast, but Jessica, kind of behind the scenes a little bit. Jessica and I talk probably every week. She and I are part of a mastermind group together, and so we know each other pretty well and do a lot of fun things. But Jessica, for folks that might not know you, tell them a little bit about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Absolutely. Well, I am a private practice owner. I founded my practice. I like to joke I founded my practice on my maternity leave. Then I did go back to my full-time job, but I had done like business planning and all of that with when my daughter was born. Wow, she's 6 years old. So 6 years ago. And for me, building my private practice was exciting. It was a lifelong dream. And I always envisioned being in solo practice for the rest of my life. But I started learning search engine optimization as my marketing. At the time, everybody said, hey, you need to go out and network. You need to go out and take people to coffee. But I didn't want to pay a babysitter for all that time to go have coffee. So at night I studied SEO. I taught myself to get my website ranking. Before I knew it, I ranked so well that I got enough calls. I quickly transitioned to group practice. Now I have a pretty decent medium-sized private pay group practice. And I joke I accidentally started an SEO business when my friends and colleagues started asking me for help. And now we're up to about a staff of 10 there. And we help tons of private practice owners every single month with their SEO too. So.
Yeah. And Jessica's my go-to person when it comes to SEO and just learning how to, and what I love about Jessica's story is that she took something that was a passion of hers and she self-taught, which I think there's some merit in that. But like everybody hears on this podcast, you don't necessarily have to do it the hard way. And you can certainly draw on the expertise of people like Jessica that have learned it. So Jessica and I are going to talk about this new thing, although it's not so new anymore, ChatGPT and artificial intelligence and how we can use it or not use it in our practices. So Jessica, kind of maybe give for people that might not know about AI and ChatGPT, maybe tell them what it is first, and then we'll just talk about maybe some different ways in which we're using it and what you're learning about it.
Yeah. So there are so many different ways that you can use artificial intelligence. And like a lot of people, I think in our field, maybe, but particularly in my field, I first heard about for blog writing. And a couple of years ago, I started hearing about people using artificial intelligence like Jasper or copy.ai, or there are just countless Copyscape. Or that's a different thing, but I can't even remember how many different AI tools I've tested out over the years to write blog posts. And I was really, really skeptical. I'm like, can it really write good content? And definitely experimented with a lot that just had very stilted content, that had content that just made stuff up, had facts that weren't accurate. It was very frustrating. So my team, if we tried out a lot of different things, if not very many of my team members were like even allowed to use any AI, those that were, we had extremely strict rules about how and when we were using it. Then ChatGPT came along. And again, I was very skeptical, but people started saying like, hey, this is different. Like, you've got to check this out. And we realized like we needed to play around with it. So there was like a whole week where I think 3 of us were constantly in communication. And it was amazing because you can just talk to it in real language. You don't have to have any special knowledge. You just like talk to it like a friend. Hey, ChatGPT, pretend you are this and tell me what to do about this. I asked it to pretend it was a veterinarian and to give me some advice about a behavioral issue with my dog yesterday while we were driving home from vacation. We'd heard our dog had a little behavioral issue. And so I'm like, I could ask Google. And I already had ChatGPT open though, because I was using some work stuff. So I'm like, hey, ChatGPT, pretend it. And that's, by the way, first tip is like, tell it to pretend it's acting as whatever you want to act as. And yeah, it gave me some ideas that then I took that and I went to Google and got more information.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I've been using it a lot for is just copywriting. And it's just, like for the Practice of Therapy website. And the other thing that we've been using AI a lot for is with this podcast, there's a service called Swell AI. And so we can plug the audio into Swell AI and it creates our show notes and our show summary for us and does a great job with it. I mean, it's just really amazing what it can do and just saves so much time, creates transcripts for us and everything else. So, yeah. It's
amazing how much it can do. This past week, I was doing an SEO training. We had to get some quick SEO, some quick content to optimize. And so a colleague and I were sitting next to each other and we were both trying to copyright for the same website, 2 similar but different pages, right? And so we gave it the same content. A really important note here, though, is I already had a thread going where we'd already been feeding it some information about her practice and she didn't. And it was fascinating because the content I got was much better than the content she got. And so that's part of what I love about ChatGPT, as opposed to some of the others, is that like, if you keep the same thread going, I will even say reference as needed information I've already given you in this thread, and ChatGPT can give you better and better and better outputs. And others are getting better about that. Now, Jasper is another AI tool that I use. I was sharing with Gordon before the show. I use like 5 or 6 a week at this point, just for different things. And a lot of them I have a little bit of shiny object syndrome and like to try out different tools. But Jasper has like this like brand voice and these memory. It's getting to where it can remember some stuff too. But I love that you can kind of interact with ChatGPT and its content kind of gets better and better, especially from that copywriting perspective. And you can ask it to rewrite parts. Like from a copywriting perspective, I give it extremely detailed instructions. And we can talk about it's called prompt engineering, the prompts that you give it and how to make those better. But once I give it a prompt, then I love that I'll tell like rewrite it and emphasize this, or that was a bit cheesy. It is okay to tell it was a bit cheesy. I know that's correct. You're going to offend the computer. So I'll just say that was cheesy.
Yeah.
Rewrite it with more of this.
Yeah. So how polite do you get? A lot of times I'll say, please write, when you really don't have to. It's a computer. I mean, so.
I say please all the time. I do. I give a it compliments too. And I don't know, am I giving it compliments because that's polite, or do my compliments actually help it give better output by telling it, like, I'm not worried about behavioral reinforcement, right? Like positive reinforcement for a computer probably doesn't matter. But if I say that's great, I wonder if that helps. I think my theory is that it helps improve the algorithm. I do think it helps when I tell it. Sometimes what'll happen is I will give it a prompt. It will follow 75% of my prompt and it will ignore 25%. And I will respond and say, blah, blah, blah. I asked for blah, blah, blah. You blah, blah, blah. It will say, I apologize for the inconvenience or the oversight. And then it will fix itself. And
oh, wow. That's crazy.
So it's polite back to me. So yeah, I'm pretty polite to it, but it's polite to me. ChatGPT and I, we're on a very good, friendly basis. We get along very well.
Right. Yeah. So before we started recording, we thought about a few areas that might be of interest to people. And I don't know that there's any particular order to this, but one, as you mentioned, was blog writing, and the importance for folks that don't know. One of the importance of writing blogs for your website is just simply SEO. So tell folks more about that and how you're using it for blog writing.
You can use it in a lot of different ways. To start with, you can ask it to give you ideas for blogs. If you are, let's say you are an ACT therapist who really loves working with middle-aged men with anxiety, you can say, pretend you are an expert or acting as an expert copywriter who advises mental health therapists. Please give me a list of 50 potential blog posts I could write that would benefit middle-aged men with anxiety, written from the perspective of an ACT therapist who specializes in treating anxiety. And it will literally give you 50 potential blog posts. Then you can give it instructions to write number 25. Now, when I give it instructions to write a blog, I believe it's Keywords Everywhere. If you download its Chrome extension and then you're using Chrome on ChatGPT, it has this thing called templates, and it will give you templates for blog writing. And so you can, let's say number 25 was metaphors to better explain anxiety. You could use their template for a prompt, and you could just choose the tone from a drop-down menu and the writing style from a drop-down menu and write in the phrase metaphors to describe anxiety, and it will write you then the blog post. I like to be more specific than that. I like to give it a word count. It will almost always short me. I'll say write 1,000 words. It'll write 700. I like to tell it to use primarily short sentences because that's good for readability. I like to give it points to emphasize. For instance, for metaphors, I might say use metaphors that would be relatable to topics such as professional careers, high school or college sports, driving, or the weather. And so I've given it topics for those metaphors. I give it more detail sometimes about tone of voice, things like that. I give it lots of really specific details. Then I hit enter, it writes it. I'll almost always ask it to rewrite a section. Then one of my SEO clients told me that this week, you can then tell it to rewrite it rewrite this, keeping the content exactly the same and add in appropriate subheadings, and it will write your subheadings for you, which was cool to learn that it can do.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. That is so cool. Yeah.
Like it's like every section of every part of blogging, you can use it. But just like anything else, the more of you give it, the better the content. We almost always at the end of blog posts recommend that you have a section that is like a direct call to action. If you want to begin anxiety counseling, call us, yada, yada. It can start to sound repetitive. So I have been known to take the call to action section off an old blog post and tell ChatGPT, rewrite this to be at the end of a blog post about blah, 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 keeping the same information, but freshening it up, sounding different. And it will help me rewrite it. So it's still me. What Google did, somebody listening, Gordon, somebody listening, you know what they're going to say when they hear me saying all this, don't you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So it's off. The microphone's off.
somebody's gonna say, Jessica, don't you know Google's gonna like get you in trouble for using AI, because that's their fear, because Google's guidance at first was super unclear. Google came back and specified recently that what they want is quality content. That's what they care about. It's okay to use AI, but they don't want you just like blindly telling AI, hey, write me a blog post about anxiety. Like, if you just tell ChatGPT, write me a blog post about symptoms of anxiety, you're going to get the same blog post. It's written for 20,000 other people. It's only minimally, if at all, going to help your website.
Right.
It's all these tips and tricks of use this, add this, use this tone of voice, emphasize this. When I'm sitting here wearing my SEO hat, it's really important that you hear me say, you have to infuse yourself still. You have to be you still.
Yeah. And I think what I've found is just taking what they write as a template and then going back in and correcting it and that sort of thing. What was cool is I think I had used it the other day to write kind of the course I'm putting together on podcasting, and I had them write kind of some promotional kinds of stuff for that. But I wanted them to write it in second person rather than, I think it was writing it in first person. And I didn't put that prompt in there, and I just put in rewrite in second person. And so it went back and it changed everything. I could have gone through and changed it all myself. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. I'll just tell ChatGPT to change it up for me. Yeah.
Sometimes for me, the easiest thing to do is so what I did yesterday is there was a blog post that I knew would be easier for me to write than to have it write, because I had extremely specific ideas of what I wanted in it. So what I did is I wrote an outline. It was a comprehensive guide, a cornerstone blog post that I was writing for an SEO client. So I wrote an outline. I gave ChatGPT the outline. What I said is, as an expert copywriter, give me feedback on this outline. My intention is blah, blah, blah. And I gave ChatGPT my outline. It gave me feedback on the outline. Then I used that outline to write by hand the article, because again, I had very specific ideas. I go to put that article on WordPress, which has Yoast, and it screams at me that my reading level is too high. And I go to Hemingway, and sure enough, my reading level is very high because Jessica's very wordy. I went to grad school just like all of you did. And we all, us therapists, we tend to write at high school or a lot of times like graduate level writing without meaning to. And I had done that. So I could see that one of my big problems was in certain sections, I had super long sentences. So there were a few sections, I had written an article, but there were a few sections where I took the paragraph, I went over to ChatGPT, I said, rewrite this paragraph to keep the same content, but have shorter sentences. Each sentence should have no more than 19 words. And I had ChatGPT take what I had written and break up the sentences. In the past, I would have done that in Hemingway, and it would have taken me 3 or 4 times as long. And I didn't do that for the whole thing, but I did do it for a handful of the paragraphs that were like, if you've ever used Hemingway, it like makes it bright. It makes it like red, the sentences that are really complicated. Yeah. For the paragraphs that were like all red, that I had gotten way too wordy because I was way too excited about the topic. Those were the couple of paragraphs that I just had ChatGPT rewrite for me. And that process worked really well for me. On an airplane.
So folks that might not be familiar, Hemingway, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of like grammatical checking software.
It is, but it is. And it's like really awesome. Hemingway editor it's similar to Grammarly, but better. And you actually can use both. We actually sometimes use both. But what Hemingway does is if you put content in there, it will tell you approximately what reading level, like what grade level the reading level is. And what I love is other tools will tell me you've used too much passive voice. I apparently talk a lot in passive voice. Hemingway will highlight in green the exact word that makes a passive voice. So I know what word to change.
Wow.
If a sentence is very complicated, it makes it red. If it's pretty complicated, it makes it yellow. So I know the exact sentence that I need to simplify. It turns it as different colors for different things. And so what I like is it's not just telling me what the problem is, but it's showing me, almost step by step how to fix my writing and how to take our brains out of academic professional therapist mode and into speak like a human that you would be speaking to in a therapy session mode. Because we naturally, when we are talking to our clients, we talk to our clients like they're people. We explain things in a way they can understand. But the minute that we sit down and write, it's like flashback to grad school. We start writing differently than we speak. And Hemingway is just like walks us step by step through how to do it. So I personally like it better than like Grammarly or some of the other tools.
Yeah. That's great. And yeah, that's an important thing to kind of bullet point there is when you're writing your copy for your website, you want it to be in language that a potential client would use. And so they're not going to be talking about graduate level stuff. They're going to be talking about real life, just kind of conversational kinds of things and problems they're having. So yeah, so to change gears a little bit, Jessica, I know you've got some pretty strong feelings about this, but I know one of the things that's happening is people starting to use AI for clinical notes and clinical things. And so give us your thoughts on that.
So you and I have in common that we like shortcuts to make writing notes faster. I know my team uses Blueprint in our practice, and they have this new thing called sessions that like we can click certain things and it'll make like little summaries of certain parts of our notes that we can copy and put into our notes, and it makes it faster. And I think our notes sound better. And you have developed super cool tools using in the past. But yeah, when you're talking about using like ChatGPT to write your notes, the first thing I want everybody to know is that there are people reading your input on ChatGPT. And so if you are telling ChatGPT, John Seymour, age 42, came in for a counseling session today, and we talked about his anxiety and used some mindfulness skills, write a session note, you now have broken HIPAA because you don't have a BAA with ChatGPT. And there's someone potentially reading that. I don't think they read every single input, but they could. And that is not secure. And so I totally understand why therapists are doing it. I love these tools. I use AI every single day, basically in some way, shape, or form. But it is really scary to me when people start using this for clinical things. I have been known to tell it something like, for instance, we had a client who we were discussing pros and cons of reducing frequency of visits and decided not to. And so it was that broad. All we said is, hey, how might you form an email? What might you include in an email when discussing whether or not to increase or reduce frequency of a visit, of the therapeutic visits as a therapist or something like that? It was that broad. It said nothing about a client's age, date of birth, where they live, name, gender, diagnosis, nothing like that in it. Similarly, I've been known to ask it to write a sample treatment plan for someone with anxiety that being treated using blah, 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 or like using these methods. Write a sample treatment plan for someone with PTSD being treated with cognitive processing therapy using measurable goals and objectives. And then use that as a template. Then if I'm actually delivering CPT to somebody, I might use that as an idea and tweak it. But I would never put more detail than that in it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I created what you were talking about earlier, Jessica, the session note helper, which uses essentially Google Forms and Google Docs, and you fill out the Google form, and then it creates this narrative in a Google Doc. Now, that's not necessarily in artificial intelligence because I just use standard phrases, and it picks what was done in the session and then, creates this standard phrase and that sort of thing. But I could see ChatGPT being used in somewhat of the same way of being able to create your own templates for your writing your notes. So being able to go to ChatGPT and say, if I did a cognitive behavioral therapy session where we used cognitive restructuring or something like that, write a narrative that would explain that for a clinical note or something like that. And so you could get kind of a template kind of language that you could then shorten your session note writing by using those kinds of templates.
So I think there are ways that it can be helpful. And you even saying that, I've asked it. My client care team has some template emails that we use. And we always talk about if you're going to have templates for emails, you must individualize them, all the things, but just to, don't forget some key parts. And I've had asked ChatGPT before to help make templates for emails. And so I think that that's similar to that. But I've even gone so far as I was writing a note or a letter for a client to submit for professional purposes. And I asked GPT, if you're going to submit if you're going to write a letter for this purpose, for this organization, what tips would you have for someone writing a letter for this organization? And it gave me some very good tips. Make sure these types of letters are often kicked back for this sort of reason. I didn't tell it anything about my client. I didn't tell it anything, literally nothing that would indicate who my client was. I did, of course, then go look at the website for the organization and, in the paperwork that the client had given me. But this was a letter that I'd not written one exactly like this before. And so I kind of wanted to use all my resources to give my client the best possible letter. So I didn't have to rewrite it or have somebody spend more time on the phone. And so it was one more resource I was able to use and just ask it, like, what are some tips that you have? And it was useful. I don't know that I would have used that as like my end all be all. I think it's important.
Right.
Do that. But it was useful.
I think with anything that you get from artificial intelligence, you really need to vet it yourself. Don't just copy and paste exactly what it's got and then put it into something, whether it's blog post or if you're using it as a prompt for a clinical note or any of that kind of thing. You need to put some human eyes on it to make sure that it's, number one, you're being ethical. Number two, just making sure that it's not too robot-y.
Yeah, I just pulled ChatGPT up over here so that I could see this. But this, by the way, applies to all artificial intelligence pretty much, to see the wording because they've changed it a few times. But it says ChatGPT may produce inaccurate information about people, places, or facts. I've seen this described different ways. I've always been like, I used to tell my SEO team, Jasper makes stuff up. It just makes stuff up. Don't believe any facts that come from or from AI. And I will say one thing I like about ChatGPT is if it gives me facts, I will ask it, is that a fact? And sometimes they'll say, no, this is an example. I have seen it cite peer-reviewed journal articles, like in APA like style, like the name of the author and the year and everything. Do not ever trust that. First of all, then I've gone and tried to find that article and couldn't find it. And I was doing that for a while. And then I figured out I could just ask it, is that a real article? It's like, no, that is an example of a study that could be done. And so it's like, just don't trust the facts. It's a great starting place, though, for where you can get it at, and then go explore if that's true.
Yeah. Well, I know we're going to probably have to have more episodes on this just in the interest of time, Jessica, but what are some other kind of, maybe real quickly, some of the other kind of ethical things we need to think about in using artificial intelligence, maybe some don'ts and that kind of thing?
Be careful when talking to our clients. Know that it can, I'm looking right, like I said, I have ChatGPT pulled up on the screen here, and it also says may occasionally produce harmful instructions or biased content. So beware of the bias. Be aware that it's only as good as the information it's trained on. So I think that that's important, is always be scanning it for bias and being aware of that. Make sure that you're truthfully representing how you have and haven't used it, if that's ever something that comes up. And also just being aware with clients and talking to them. I had a client that we were trying to think of different options for how they could phrase something. And so in a online therapy session, I pulled up ChatGPT, but we talked about the dangers of using ChatGPT to generate these ideas. And then we used ChatGPT to come up with a lot of different ideas of how the client could say something, and talked about the pros and cons. But this was a client that I felt like had the discernment skills for us to do that. I certainly have some clients that I wouldn't have been like, go ask ChatGPT for advice, because I would not want a client to go use ChatGPT for therapy. We definitely have seen there have been lots of proof out there. Just do a Google search if you want to see that is a big concern. And I think we as a field should be very concerned about that. We know that people in the AI field have expressed a lot of concern about the ethics of AI and about the capabilities. And so we definitely need to be staying on top of it. This is a powerful tool that can be used for good, but it can also be scary. And so just being kind of aware of that and being mindful of how we use it.
Yeah. Yeah. And just some of the buzz I'm hearing is that, particularly for online sessions, therapists using AI to give them kind of talking point prompts, during a therapy session, which it's a little scary, I think, as far as not, being too dependent on it to really do clinical work.
Wow. I hadn't thought of that. My immediate thought is I'm like, wow, AI isn't a therapist.
Oop, sorry.
Like AI isn't a therapist. So I don't know how much I love the idea of AI helping the therapist be the therapist. But on the other hand, if you have the skills, like I wouldn't ask it to tell me how to use Gottman principles because I wouldn't know enough about Gottman to appropriately evaluate it. But if I can't remember a term from DBT, and I am extensively trained in DBT and I have years of experience, but haven't actively practiced it. And I was trying to remember, what is that emotion regulation skill? Like I could see maybe in a session asking it or if I'm trying to explain dialectics the way I always have, and the client's not getting it, maybe I could ask it for ideas, but I think that you have to have the knowledge to evaluate what it's saying, because it does have such a tendency to make stuff up. That's my fear with therapists relying on it too much, is you could end up perpetuating inaccurate information.
Right. Well, Jessica, I know we could spend all day long, and maybe we will one time.
Literally.
Talking about this stuff, but tell folks how they can find out maybe more about this. I know you've done some blog posts and some other, do you have a training coming up or anything about all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to our website, simplifiedseoconsulting.com, check out our blog posts. We have tons of blog posts on this topic. And yes, we've been hosting a series of webinars. I don't have the training schedule up in front of me because I just got back from vacation, sorry. But if you look on there, we keep all of the latest stuff, and we do have a variety of blog posts on this. And most importantly, we're going to keep them coming. So this is a topic that's evolving. And even now, the advice I give is a little bit different than what I gave 3 months ago. And if you're listening to this recorded 6 months from now, definitely check out our blog, because 6 months from now, the blog posts, we may have 3 new blog posts about AI that might have even slightly different advice, because this is such a quickly evolving area.
Right. Yeah. Well, we'll have links here in the show notes and the show summary to get to simplified SEO quickly. And Jessica's got some tons of resources. And if you've never heard Jessica give a talk or whatever, find places where you can do that. I know one thing, quick shout out for our good friend Whitney. Jessica's going to be at the Wise Practice Summit in October in Savannah, Georgia. And Jessica and I will both be there. And I know, Jessica, you're presenting.
I am. And you're presenting too, right?
No, not yet. I might be a backup somewhere along the way, but I'm not so far. Okay. I'm not. I'm just looking forward to being there, just attending. So
it's going to be a great group. I was looking at who all is going to be there, and it's going to be amazing. I can't wait. And we get to hang out in Savannah, and the hotel looks incredible.
Yes, it does. It's going to be a great event. So there you go, Whitney. We gave you some free advertisement. So, but anyway, Jessica, I'll be talking with you here soon. Well, again, a big thanks to Jessica for joining me on the podcast again, and I'm really grateful to her and what she adds to my life, and just being a support there for me. And one of the things about being in a mastermind group is that it's a way to not only learn from each other, but this particular mastermind group that I'm in with Jessica, along with Whitney Owens and Uriah Guilford, we're really a lot of support to each other just in our lives in general. And so we really look forward to getting together every week. And but be sure and check out Simplified SEO. And also, if you want to find out more about Jessica's practice, Aspire Counseling, there'll be links here in the show notes and the show summary. And you'll be hearing more from Jessica here in the future, I'm sure. And again, thankful to her for being on the podcast. And also, before you go, if you'll be sure and check out the Practice Launch Club by going to practiceoftherapy.com/launch club. And if you're in those beginning stages of starting your practice, this community can be a big support to you. So be sure and check it out, and be sure and use that promo code between now and the end of September the promo code again is simply PLC Fall 2023, and get $20 off your monthly membership by using that promo code. And again, big thanks to our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice, and we just couldn't operate without them. Their platform is second to none, and their support is second to none, and they're always coming out with new features and that sort of thing to help you run your practice smoothly and automate as much as possible. So be sure and check them out, practiceoftherapy.com/therapy notes. And if you want to try them out for 2 months, you can do that by using the promo code Gordon, just GORDON, and try them out for 2 months for free. So be sure and check them out. And again, folks, thanks for joining me for this episode. And do take time to follow us wherever you're listening to your podcasts. And also leave us a review. Love getting feedback from people about the podcast and a rating. And when you do that, that also helps other people find us and kind of boosts us up in the rankings of the podcast world. So I invite you to do that. So take care, folks. Lots of great guests coming up. And as I mentioned last week in last week's podcast, we're coming up on our 300th episode here. And so got a special guest lined up for that episode. So stay tuned. Take care, folks. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.